Nicholas Cross here, sunny Chicago, Illinois, Rockin' Wrestling Radio, exclusively on YouTube. And boy, oh boy, do we have a show for you today. We're going to be looking at Night of Champions some more, getting a little bit more familiar with what's going on at the big event that WWE is going to be producing this September. Also, we're going to be talking to the fans across the professional wrestling groups on Facebook. We're going to be getting into a Fantasy Hall of Fame and Fantasy Draft. And then finally, we're going to be talking about the rumor mill as it relates to professional wrestling. All this and so much more on today's September 10th, 2014's edition of Rockin' Wrestling Radio. All right, guys and gals, Nicholas Cross, your host with the most here, live from sunny Chicago, Illinois, and we are talking about all things wrestling. Of course, that's what we always talk about, isn't it? It's almost like we're an obsessed bunch of nuts that just can't get enough. Well, at least I am. And I know that many of you guys are. And I know that you can't get enough because I know that you'll be tuning in to WWE's Night of Champions. And first and foremost, what a name for a pay-per-view event. Night of Champions. It reminds me of great battles of the past. David versus Goliath. The champion of Israel meets the Palestinian champion in Goliath. And big things are scheduled to happen. And of course, WWE is doing big things this time around. They have quite the card structured for us at Night of Champions, and there are 3 matches that have been added recently that to me could add even more appeal to Night of Champions. One of those matches is for the WWE Tag Team Championship. It's going to be Stardust and Goldust versus the Uso brothers. I'm curious to know what you guys think about that out there in wrestling land, so if you don't mind, go to our YouTube channel and comment below, or you can go to one of the great Facebook groups that we're a part of and join the conversation there as well. But the 2 other matches that are important to me, not more important than the tag team titles, but really important to me, is the match between Rusev and Mark Henry and Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. Now, there's a lot of conversation about Rusev. There's a lot of people that are saying that Rusev really don't have what it takes to be a WWE star. Well, I don't know if I agree with that. The guy's big, the guy's bad, and he's Russian. I don't know that Rusev will ever be the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. He's certainly not going to beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 31. But Rusev does have that appeal of a mid-card guy, just like way back in the 80s when we saw Nikolai Volkov. If you think of Nikita Koloff, you think about all of these guys with the Russian gimmicks in the 80s that really got over one way or the other. Well, Rusev has the ability to do the same thing. You add Lana to the equation, my, with all of the Vladimir Putin references, and you really have a hot segment that WWE can produce. Everybody hates Vladimir Putin, everybody hates Lana, everybody hates Rusev, and it's a super heel type personification that's out there. Well, in the other corner, there's Mark Henry, the super American, literally the world's strongest man, the Olympian, the guy that's representing our country. He's going to be flying red, white, and blue, really, really proud. And it's my opinion that in this match, it would be good for Mark Henry to get a win. It would be good to show that we're not just building talent by beating old talent, but Mark Henry gets a win. Rusev can retaliate on Raw the next night and start that feud and that segment between the two of them and make it even hotter somehow, some way. But you don't just need to bring in Mark Henry to get his butt kicked at Night of Champions and be done with it. Another match that we've been talking about, or that has recently been produced, is the match between Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. I am especially interested in this match because I think that it has the ability to be a show stealer. We went to the internet and asked some of our Facebook groups out there what they thought. One was No Holds Barred Wrestling Talk, and we asked them what they thought about the Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins match. Dave Rollinger from I don't know where, he said that Roman Reigns would win because he was an animal compared to Batista. And, I got to be honest with you, David, I don't think that we can really compare Roman Reigns to Batista at this point. I know that the character is attributed to that of Batista and that they are similar in the fact that they dominate early on in their careers, but in reality, Batista and Roman Reigns have two different characters. I don't think that Roman Reigns is portrayed as an animal. I think he is an overly dominant guy with unbelievable talent, possibly one of the greats that will ever go down if he has a long career. But I don't see him in the same category as Batista. Batista's a much larger guy, much different wrestler. Alicia Morris said, as much as I would love to see Roman Reigns win, I doubt the Authority will let that happen. I'm sure Uncle Kane will make an appearance. If Roman Reigns wins, it will probably be because Seth Rollins gets disqualified. Alicia, I agree with you. The Authority isn't going to let Roman Reigns win, or at least they shouldn't. This is a hot item, and I think that if you allow Roman Reigns to beat Seth Rollins while Seth Rollins is hot, you take away from the character of Seth Rollins. So I think it's very important that WWE carefully play this one out and get themselves together. I think that we should see the Authority break into the match and interfere, and I think that Seth Rollins should pick up the W. We went over to Wrestling Talk and asked the same question. Billy Pence said that Roman is a better wrestler. Billy, I disagree with you wholeheartedly, my friend. I don't think that Roman Reigns is anywhere near the quality of wrestler as Seth Rollins. If you go back to FCW, you can find a three-way dance between Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, and Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns was going by that Laikai guy or whatever his name was. And if you watch that match, you can see a completely different idea of Roman Reigns' talent. In fact, he seems second-rate compared to Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins. So while Roman may be a bigger fan favorite, and Roman may be your favorite, Billy, I certainly don't think that Roman Reigns is a better wrestler. Not yet, anyway. Jeremy Coles said Seth is Mr. Money in the Bank. When the Shield were together, Dean got a push and Reigns got a push. Now Rollins should be able to beat them both for his push. And, I guess I agree with you a little bit there, Jeremy. It did seem as though that Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns had their day. Of course, their day's not over. They're going to continue to have their day. They're going to continue to do big things in the wrestling business. But it is Seth Rollins' time. I mean, we know that the guy's going to be the World Heavyweight Champion. It's a matter of time. We don't know when. He's the Money in the Bank guy. He's got the briefcase. We know he's going to carry the title. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take for WWE to get him there. So this is a really good point, Jeremy. Although that Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns still have the ability to carry a flag, Seth Rollins is certainly the it factor right now. So good answer there. Eddie Adorno said that Roman Reigns wins. And Eddie, that's very possible, although highly unlikely. I would like to see Seth Rollins shine a little bit more in this match and take his place, his rightful place, as a top card guy. Well, we've talked about that, and I appreciate your guys' responses, but I'm also curious what you guys would think if there was some fantasy booking involved. Like if we go back to WrestleMania 10, Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels in a ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship. Wouldn't it have been neat for Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins to go at it for the Money in the Bank title suspended above the ring? Seth Rollins could have come with this overly confident attitude and challenged Reigns and put his Money in the Bank title on the line. Then it would have been conceivable for Roman Reigns to have won the match, and even more conceivable then for him to have attempted to cash in on Brock Lesnar. Although, if I were booking, it would have been a thwarted attempt, and Brock Lesnar would have dominated him, showing that even though Roman Reigns is a dominant guy, he's nowhere near the Beast incarnate. I'm also curious on our groups out there what you guys think about this. If it was fantasy booking and we were putting them in a gimmick match, what would be the best gimmick match for you? How would you book this thing? How would you feel about it? Of course, it's my opinion that Mark Henry should beat Rusev and that Seth Rollins should beat Roman Reigns. I want to know more of what you think and why you think it. So be sure to go over to No Holds Barred Wrestling Talk, Let's Talk Wrestling, and Wrestling Talk, and those links are posted right here in the description of this video, and tell me what you think about these new additions to Night of Champions. Hey guys, gals, wrestling fans, friends, and automobiles, Nicholas Cross. I'm going to be right back in sunny Chicago, Illinois, and we're going to talk a little bit about what you guys are talking about on these wrestling groups. Hey, Nicholas Crossbeck here in Chicago, Illinois at Rockin' Wrestling Radio, exclusively on YouTube. And, you know, part of what I love to do is get interactive with my fans all over the world. And part of that means that we got to talk, we got to communicate, we got to share our feelings and our thoughts with one another. And that's what we're doing at Rockin' Wrestling Radio. We've joined 3 groups on Facebook, and we are initializing this awesome program where we talk to you daily through these groups, and we share your feelings and your thoughts. Well, in this segment, we're going to be looking at these 3 groups and talking about what you're talking about, and I'm going to be chiming in on my opinions. So stay tuned right now for Wrestle Talk with Nicholas Cross all across Facebook. All right, guys and gals, I am back, and man, is there a lot of conversation going on across the wrestling boards and the groups on Facebook, and I have been excited to be part of those groups and part of those conversations. I think that the hottest topic to me, at least, I don't know if it's the hottest topic, but it's one that really rings into me and something that I'm really interesting. Garrett Foster on September 8th posted a picture of Lex Luger. He was dressed in the Lex Express red, white, and blue. Do you guys remember that way back in the 90s when Lex Luger had his big run with WWE? He was actually the face of the company. I know a lot of us have our doubts and our problems with Lex Luger, including me, and that's on a personal level. But the thing about it is Luger was legitimately the face of the company. And over here at Wrestling Talk, Garrett Foster posted the picture, and he asked the question, do y'all think Lex Luger should go into the Hall of Fame? And before I get into the fans' response, which is just a numerous amount of responses, I mean, when you talk about responses, there are hundreds of people who chimed in on this to talk about this, and it was pretty cool to be part of that conversation. But I want to say this. It really depends, my answer, if we're talking about a Wrestling Hall of Fame in general, the NWA Hall of Fame, the WCW Hall of Fame, or the WWE Hall of Fame. If we're talking about a Wrestling Hall of Fame in general, it is my opinion that Lex Luger contributed enough and wore enough titles in all the organizations to be part of a class Hall of Fame. Well, you guys, in most cases, agreed that Lex Luger should be part of the Hall of Fame. In fact, I would say that somewhere between 65 to 70% of the posts were absolutely right. Lex Luger should be part of the Hall of Fame. But there were some pretty interesting responses. As a matter of fact, one of them that was a yes gave a reason why Luger should be part of the Hall of Fame. It was Luis Ramirez. He said, yes, he should. He did good at one point, especially when he body slammed Yokozuna. I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but it was a big overtaking for Luger to have body slammed Yokozuna. It was a moment in wrestling that wrestling seemed to have stood still. I don't know if I can think of a more exciting moment when I was around in that day than Luger body slamming Yokozuna. So good point there, Lewis. Corey Mack said, no, heck no, man. And, you know, everybody has their opinion why Luger shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. What I'm curious of is what the reasons are that Luger isn't in the Hall of Fame or shouldn't be. And Louis Vega said, nope, ask Miss Elizabeth if he should. Of course, we know that there are so many rumors and so many facts that surround Lex Luger and Miss Elizabeth. I'm not going to get into all the details because I try to stay away from all the negative mess, but we do know that Miss Elizabeth passed away, and we do know that the accusations, whether fact or accusation, were centered around the fact that it had to do with Lex Luger. So if Miss Elizabeth is a factor in voting a guy into a Wrestling Hall of Fame, when we look specifically at a guy's career and not his personal life, then Lex Luger shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. However, if it's not about that, then we have to consider that Lex Luger and the Hall of Fame run are about wrestling, not about personal things. But Louis Vega did make a point, again later on in the post, that baseball players have decided on their personal lives as well as steroid use, which Lex Luger is guilty of, bad decisions on both. Now, if we factor in steroids, which we do know that Luger was involved with steroids, then maybe he shouldn't be part of the Hall of Fame. But I got a question. How many guys in the Wrestling Hall of Fame in WWE and otherwise have been on steroids? So I'm not sure, Louis, that we should base it off of that either. We should base it off of what he contributed to the wrestling business. And of course, Louis Vega came back again and said, but if we are judging on talent alone, then yes. And Louis, I do agree with you. Although I don't think that Luger was the best wrestler in the world, I certainly do feel as though that he did contribute enough to the business. And let's see, Quentin Walters said, I understand that WCW did have a Hall of Fame, but I don't think WCW brand will ever come back. And he was in reference to some comments that were made about how Lex Luger could be in the WCW Hall of Fame. Quentin then came back and said Luger needs to be in the NWA Hall of Fame, and I can't agree with you more on that, Quentin. If there is an NWA Hall of Fame that's written in history, and the annals of time prove that to be, then I'm going to say I can't have any bigger agreement with you than the fact that Luger should definitely be in the Hall of Fame. You had a lot of comments on here that were kind of outrageous about Luger being a pansy. I'm not using the right P word there. About him being overrated and about this and that and the other. And then there were the Elizabeth comments. But this one, Dan Jones, is interesting to me. He said no, he was a failure in WWE every time he was pushed. Maybe if they make a WCW wing. I don't know that Lex Luger was a failure every single time he was pushed. I think that the Lex Express, the man made in the red, white, and blue, if I can talk, was a good gimmick, and it had a good run. Another one that we don't remember is when he formed a tag team with the British Bulldog called the Allied Powers. It was short-lived because of Luger's transition over to WCW, but it was still, I would consider, a successful tag team, and they had some great heat from the crowd because they were both loved, both in Great Britain and the United States. So I'm not sure that that was the best point to be made because I don't think he was a failure in WWE. I just don't think he was around long enough to work what he needed to work in WWE. James Buskey says, eventually, yes, Luger should be in the Hall of Fame, but not right now. Grant Bolt said, no, he got Elizabeth hooked on coke. And once again, if it's about personal lives, then I don't think he should be, but I'm trying not to get into that too much, although most of the comments here are all centered around Elizabeth. Kevin Stevens says, no doubt he should be in the Hall of Fame, maybe the best U.S. champ of all times. And the comments keep going and going and going and going and going. You guys go over to Wrestling Talk, click the Join Group tab, and get part of this conversation. It's a post by Garrett Foster and a picture of Luger in red, white, and blue. Pretty cool conversation there. Well, if we go over to Let's Talk Wrestling, another Facebook group that we associate with, we can see that part of the big news is the death of Sean O'Hare. As a matter of fact, Joseph Teague posted a picture earlier today, and it talks about Sean O'Hare. Of course, he was found dead yesterday, about 12 hours ago, in his Spartanburg, South Carolina home, and the reasons are unknown. Gareth Lee said, not O'Hare, and of course, probably the reason that Gareth said this is because Sean O'Hare was actually a really good wrestler. If you guys remember him, he was with Mark Jindrak in WCW and Chuck Palumbo a little bit in WCW and WWE, and he held tag team titles with both Jindrak and O'Hare. A really good wrestler, and he died really young at 43 years old. There were some releases from some of his friends that said recently he had battled with drug addiction and some depression problems, and it's just really sad to me that we lose great wrestlers such as this. And of course, Gail Carey, rest in peace, she says, concerning Sean O'Hare. And we would like to reach out and say to the family of Sean O'Hare, a good friend of mine over the years, that we're sorry and we give you our condolences. And of course, we're going to celebrate more than we are going to mourn. We're going to celebrate the life and the lineage that Sean gave us because he was just a phenomenal athlete. One of the great young talents that was an upstart in the WCW, had an opportunity to make it to the moon and back. Not too sure what happened in between, lost some contact in recent years. But nevertheless, Sean O'Hare, you were a phenomenal performer, and we thank you for all of your contributions that you made to the wrestling industry. Well, if we go over to No Holds Barred Wrestling Talk, there's a conversation that really interests me probably more than any of them, and And as I like this conversation, Travis Noel posted, best hardcore wrestler ever. And interestingly enough, he posted a picture with his comment of Mick Foley in the Mankind gimmick, wearing the plaid shirt with the Mankind smiley face underneath. And what a picture that is, huh? It's always the image of what hardcore wrestling was, but Mick Foley in this gimmick wasn't the idea of what hardcore wrestling was. We should remember Mick Foley as Cactus Jack if we want to know what hardcore wrestling was. You can go over to the classic death matches in Japan between Cactus Jack and Terry Funk. We're talking about people having their ears ripped off, Terry Funk breaking his arm and bones sticking out of it, and just the craziest stuff. Barbed wire, light bulbs, the fluorescent ones, the ones that are dangerous to your health. These guys going through these things and being beaten to death with them. It is absolutely obscene. And so Travis asked, who is the greatest hardcore wrestler ever? My opinion is it's going to be 100% without a question Mick Foley. I think that even as hardcore as Terry Funk was in Japan, as well as over here in the States and in other countries, and in Mexico, Terry Funk don't hold a candle to Mick Foley, whether it was Mick Foley in the personification of Cactus Jack, whether it was Mick Foley in the personification of Mankind, of Dude Love, or of Mick Foley. And not to mention, it is my opinion that Mick Foley became a bigger name superstar than Terry Funk, and it was because of his hardcore iconage. Think about one moment. It was WWE. It was a Hell in a Cell match between The Undertaker and Mick Foley. You guys remember it. It's one of the most classic images that we have etched in our brains. The Undertaker and Mick Foley are both on top of this cell, and The Undertaker hurls Mick Foley off the top of the cell through the announce table to the floor. 15 feet, Mick Foley fell from the top of a cage to the floor, flat on his back. Maybe more than 15 feet, maybe 20 feet. I don't know how high that darn thing is, but that's pretty hardcore. And if you account for the fact that Foley was part of some super hardcore matches, those death matches over in Japan, it would be something that would blow your mind. And, of course, everybody pretty much agrees on this comment, on this train of comments, if you will, except one. Peter Quigley says that Terry Funk was the greatest hardcore wrestler of all time. You know, I got to be honest with you, though, Peter. Terry Funk may have gone down as one of the greatest wrestling personifications of all time, but I certainly don't remember him for his hardcore lineage. I remember him as that crazy guy that was always doing whatever it took to win a match, including a moonsault at 88 years old. Terry Funk, one of the most insane wrestlers that we've ever seen in our entire career. Hey, I want to ask you guys to go on over and become part of these groups so that you can become part of the conversation. These groups will be posted right below in the comments section. Also, if you guys want to talk about it right here on our YouTube channel, feel free to chime in and tell us what you got on your mind. Hey, I want you guys to hang on for a minute because we're going to be right back with a little bit more wrestling talk, a little bit more Rockin' Wrestling Radio, and we're going to be talking about the Fantasy Hall of Fame. I want to know what you guys think, and I want to know how you guys feel. We'll be right back right after this. Hey, Nicholas Cross, Chicago, Illinois, Rockin' Wrestling Radio, exclusively on YouTube, and I thank you guys for tuning in each and every day and joining us as we talk all things wrestling. And one thing that involves wrestling is the fantasy genre. It just is something that intrigues me to think about how things could have been, should have been, or would have been had they went this particular way or that particular way. Well, this is where we can really get interactive with one another. We can talk about fantasy wrestling in depth in one of 3 channels, as well as right here exclusively on YouTube. You guys can go over to No Holds Barred Wrestling Talk, Let's Talk Wrestling, Wrestling Talk. The links will be in the description of this video, and you can click Join the Group and become part of our conversation as it relates to fantasy things and other things pro wrestling. And you know, I've got some questions, and I've got some things that I want to put together. As a matter of fact, for tomorrow's show, I want to talk about Whom would be added to the Hall of Fame had you had the ability to induct anyone in the history of professional wrestling? Just one person. And who would that person be? It could be anyone from a promoter to the lessest of wrestlers that has ever existed. Also, if you had the ability to begin your own wrestling brand, and you had the ability to draft any wrestler throughout the history of wrestling as a first-round draft pick, who would that person be? It could be Gorgeous George. It could be the Nature Boy Ric Flair. It could be Mark Jindrak. It could be anybody in the history of professional wrestling. So I'm curious, if you had the ability to induct one person in all of wrestling into the Hall of Fame, who would your choice be? And if you had the ability to draft as the first-round draft pick of a brand of wrestling, your guy, or gal for that matter, who would that individual be all throughout the history of wrestling? And we will talk about this as well as feature your answers from one of our 3 great groups on Facebook right here exclusively tomorrow at Rockin' Wrestling Radio on YouTube. Hey, you guys, hang on, stay tuned. I'm going to be right back talking about who's next for Brock Lesnar. Nicholas Cross here, and we're talking about the Rumor Roundup. We're going to be asking the question, who's next for Brock Lesnar? And what's in the news about CM Punk? How about the return of Daniel Bryan? And so much more, so come right back with me for the Rumor Roundup. All right, this is Rumor Roundup. This is Nicholas Cross, and this is Rockin' Wrestling Radio exclusively on YouTube and talked about all throughout Facebook with some great groups, some great friends, and some great fans. I want to thank you guys for joining us today as we get ready for our closing segment on this Wednesday, September 10th of the great year 2014. And we're going to start this closing segment off by asking you a simple question. Who's next for Brock Lesnar? Of course, we know that Brock Lesnar has John Cena at Night of Champions, and we can only assume that that's going to be another beatdown as was at the last event. Of course, SummerSlam notwithstanding, Night of Champions notwithstanding, and all assumptions aside, who do you guys think is next for the Beast Incarnate? It looks like the rumor mill is starting to heat up with some big names in some big ways, but I'm curious to see how WWE will use these talents against a talent like that of Brock Lesnar. Some of the names that have been thrown in the hat are The Big Show, Mark Henry, and even an early perception of Roman Reigns. I'm curious what in the world the WWE would be doing. Number one, The Big Show doesn't have that mean, angry giant appeal anymore, so we automatically know that Brock Lesnar would beat him. That is, of course, unless the WWE went a different direction. And it's my opinion that in this rumor mill question concerning Brock Lesnar, WWE needs to add some shock value to the programming. It wouldn't be bad for us to be surprised on a weekly basis about what in the world's going to happen next. I mean, we saw this past week on Monday, John Cena challenged Brock Lesnar next Monday, and John Cena said that if Brock didn't show up, he was going to kick Paul Heyman's butt. Of course, then the WWE had to announce the fact that Brock Lesnar was indeed going to be there next Monday, and I have no clue why. Let's add some shock factor. Well, I think if we were going to put Brock Lesnar with Big Show or Mark Henry or even Roman Reigns early, I think we need to add some shock factor. Somewhere along the lines, Brock Lesnar needs to look like he has some humanity. I understand he's the Beast Incarnate, but my goodness, he can't just destroy everybody all the time. Not this way, especially not if you're trying to build him as the unstoppable. So he's going to have somebody to stand in his way who's legit, who has some genuine cred. In other news concerning the rumor roundup, CM Punk enters the wrestling fray again, but in a different way. WWE 2K15 releases its big game, and one of the main features is John Cena CM Punk feud. Of course, there is talk around the wrestling rumor mill right now that CM Punk has involved his lawyers in what is not yet a lawsuit, but certainly is a debate about CM Punk's involvement in WWE 2K15. May I issue this to our good buddy CM Punk? You already walked out of a contract. You've already walked away from your fan base, and let's face it, that's what he did. And now you want to be out of a video game? At least that's what presumed. Let me tell you something, CM Punk. It's time for you to grow up. You can get some real money off of this thing, as well as entertain your audience still with WWE 2K15 as the venue. Maybe you don't want to be in WWE, I get that. But your audience wants you, my friend. And you need to start caring about more than just yourself. You need to start caring about the kids that love you, the adults that love you, and the people who wear your t-shirt adamantly. Remember, they made you money, pal, and it's time for you to start returning it to them by showing them the respect that they deserve. Maybe you don't want to be a wrestler anymore, but by God, some of us loved you when you wrestled, and we want to see you in the venue somehow. So get over it. News in Daniel Bryan's case is a little bit more positive than lawsuits or the possible talk of them. It turns out that Daniel Bryan will no longer be needing that second surgery as it relates to Tommy John surgery. Brie Bella issued a release stating that Daniel Bryan would not be having that surgery and that it's possible that he may be returning within 3 months. Well, if that rumor's true, which I'm almost certain it is, almost from the horse's mouth, Daniel Bryan's wife, then I think it's interesting to start planning ahead. And when we plan ahead, we have to think, is Daniel Bryan going to come right back to the fray and be the man once again? Are they going to put Roman Reigns back in a shadow? I'm interested to see what's going to happen. It is my opinion that Daniel Bryan should wait till Royal Rumble to return. It is also my opinion that Royal Rumble should end with Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns in the ring. It is also my opinion that Daniel Bryan should eliminate the Juggernaut and go on to the very next pay-per-view to put his shot at Brock Lesnar against Roman Reigns when Roman Reigns turns heel. It would be interesting booking, and of course that's fantasy booking, and of course that's only a rumor. And speaking of rumors, there are a lot of things going around about a lot of different areas, like Bully Ray, Kurt Angle, Sting. I'm curious to hear how you guys feel about the rumor mill of professional wrestling. Like, for instance, is Bully Ray going back to TNA? It's rumored that he's got some dates scheduled ahead of him, and it looks like that he will be part of a TNA tour. Also, is it possible that WWE could be interested in their former Bubba Ray Dudley? I'm interested to see what he could do as a singles wrestler in the WWE ranks. Also, Kurt Angle. To me, it's a no question that Kurt Angle needs to be back in WWE, and I think that WWE needs him. If WWE has to cut 5 wrestlers that are hardly ever seen on the show to get a Kurt Angle, let's make that happen. Also, Sting, with the inception of his character at WWE 2K15, we can only assume that we're going to see big things in the future for Sting. But what are those big things? He talked recently with Jim Ross on Podcast 1 in the Ross Report about what he was hoping for, and the words "one last big match" came out. Could that last big match be at WrestleMania 31 versus The Undertaker? Could that last big match be the epic that we've all been dying to see for nearly 20 years? And the question is, what would be the outcome of said match? Undertaker's already lost to Brock Lesnar. Sting and Undertaker are both aged individuals. How in the world would they main event card a WrestleMania 31 spectacular and still make it look really, really good? Of course, as we know with Undertaker, he has really aged well. As a matter of fact, his wrestling quality has become better and better the older he gets. And Sting, I'm not sure if you couldn't argue that point about him as well. So I'm interested to see where WWE, where professional wrestling is going to go with the free agents that are coming up, with the Ring of Honor guys that are coming over, and everything in between. Hey, I'm also interested to know what you guys think about what's going on in professional wrestling. I'm interested to know where you guys stand and how you guys feel. So let's chime in on these rumors here at YouTube in the comments section, or go over to one of the 3 great groups groups that represent us, and that's on Facebook at No Holds Barred Wrestling Talk, Let's Talk Wrestling, and Wrestling Talk. All you got to do is click join, and they'll be glad to have you part of their conversation on a daily basis, as I am always glad to have you part of my conversation on a daily basis. Do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to click the little thumbs up button to show your support for our product. Hey, this is Nicholas Cross. This is Wednesday, September 10th, 2014, and this is me telling you that I'm signing off. Again tomorrow, we'll be talking again at Rockin' Wrestling Radio, exclusively here on YouTube.